You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
Sons of the Shoe is back. We ride again. Spencer German, no Nick Wilson this week. Once again, he was just getting resettled after a week away on vacation. So hopefully he'll be back with me next week, and I'm excited to get him back at some point. But in the meantime, we do have plenty to talk about in the week of college football, the week of Ohio State football on this week's episode. So I'm glad that you're jumping on in and that you'll be along for the ride for the next 45 minutes or so. It's Spencer German with you. And I do want to remind you to like, follow, subscribe. Am I missing anything? Comment at the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel where you can watch this podcast. But if you're on the listening audience, do those other things I mentioned wherever you get your podcast, whether it's the Odyssey app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Did I mention Apple Podcasts? I might have mentioned Apple Podcasts. I'm going to mention Apple Podcasts again. We encourage you to go there, like, follow, and subscribe to the show. And be sure to tune in whenever you get a chance when it pops up on your radar that there's a new episode dropping. And this new episode is going to be a go on. A lot of different places we could go. Sort of it was an interesting week, really last couple weeks, because it is the dog days of June, the dog days of summer, if you will, in terms of the college football news cycle. There's not a ton going on right now specific to individual programs other than recruits coming to campus, visiting, trying to kind of get a lay of the land and make some determinations about where they could end up for their football playing futures. And we're seeing a lot of that on social media. I know there's a bunch of receivers from next year's class who are making visits and connecting with Brian Hartline and doing the whole shebang there. And we know Ohio State's going to always be in the mix for wide receivers. But this week was a big one at a different offensive position because one of the top running backs in next year's class, 4-star recruit Bo Jackson, who is out of Cleveland, Ohio, so local for us, Nick and I here in Cleveland, is set to – he made his verbal commitment, obviously, to Ohio State, the number 5 running back in the country, the number 81st nationally ranked prospect in the entire country, according to 24/7 Sports. And this is a big deal for a number of reasons that I want to kind of dissect you through here to start this episode off. Because the commitment of Bo Jackson, and again, in college football nowadays, it's always important to lay down the baseline statement that this is always fluid. Guys can change their mind. A verbal commitment is not a signing on the dotted line. We know, remember how Jeremiah Smith's recruitment went? Remember how his signing day went? They were down to the wire, unsure if he was actually going to commit to Ohio State or not, if he was going to flip to Miami. And so much so that, like, Ryan Day in real time, if you remember, was giving that press conference updating about the guys they had signed, how they felt about it, their excitement level, the guys coming in, all these different things. And then he was at the podium talking as Jeremiah Smith made his official announcement. It was Ohio State, and he did that kind of like fake feigning thing on the stage. So, like, we know this stuff is very fluid. It can change. It's not, this isn't etched in stone, but it's an important commitment to get this early on in the process because first of all, as you look at this running back room, we know that this year the running back room is absolutely stacked. Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, so curious, like many of you, to see how those guys are kind of utilized in the offense, in terms of like what downs they're out there. Is it splitting series? Is it rotating in the middle of series? We'll kind of see how Ryan Day and Chip Kelly handle all that. And so I'm fascinated by that, obviously, and that's a conversation we'll get to later this offseason, leading up to the season, all these different things. But this year, it's not a problem. Next year, though, what's interesting about the Bo Jackson commitment is that this is a guy who legitimately might have a chance to play and see meaningful reps next year as a true freshman, just because of the state of that running back room right now. Because again, you have it's very top heavy in that you have two guys who are at the tail end of their college careers with a chance to, they're going to obviously go pro at the end of next season and move on to the next level. And so the behind them is going to be kind of this unproven group that Bo Jackson's going to get a chance to actually compete with and maybe see some playing time with, especially when you lost Dallas Hayden, who transferred obviously earlier in the spring. That was your maybe next guy up behind Trevion Henderson and now behind Quinshon Judkins as well. But without him in the picture, you're talking about James Peoples, you're talking about Sam Williams Dixon, and you're talking about T.C. Caffrey. I wanted to say McCaffrey, who, by the way, all three of those guys I think flashed pretty well at the spring game, and I liked what I saw when each of them was in there getting some reps, and that's notable. But again, unproven group largely, and I think we're probably going to spend most of the season still understanding that that's an unproven group and not really seeing a ton from them because of how top-heavy it is with Judkins, with Henderson. Those two guys are going to be handling the bulk of the carries, the bulk of the workload for that group. So I'm fascinated by this addition, or at least this verbal commitment now, because to the possibility of seeing Bo Jackson step in immediately and compete for a job and maybe see some playing time as a freshman is an enticing thing to me, and I'm excited about it, especially with his running style. He is this very bully style running back, power back, who can both run you over and is very strong, but also can catch passes out of the backfield and show some of that finesse as a pass catcher. He's kind of the prototypical modern day running back that you're looking for. And so I think this is a great addition for Ohio State, especially when you look at this running back room that, again, is going to be transitioning from, hey, we have a couple proven guys at the top of the list right now, at the depth chart right now. How's it going to filter out after they leave? And he could honestly be in the mix next year. The other reason that this is important, an important addition for the Buckeyes, is that you lose Tony Alford this spring. He goes to Michigan. We know Benedict Arnold, call him whatever you want, hate him. He's going to your biggest rival. Fine. But I was right there with you banging that drum for what it's worth too. But then you get Carlos Locklyn stepping in his place. And we all kind of consensusly said, his reputation from Oregon sort of speaks for itself. But I want to see, what he's doing at Ohio State, how he's handling this. Is there going to be a drop-off in the recruiting classes because Tony Alford's been there for so long? He kind of been a staple of this program. He's a good recruiter in his own right. So what kind of relationships were you going to have? How is this all going to kind of stick? Were you still going to be getting those top-level recruits? Were they going to follow Locklyn, guys that maybe he was talking to or interested in as he transitions from Oregon to Ohio State? And the answer to that question with this commitment is a resounding, I think, yes. Because from what I understand too, the transition from Alford to Locklyn actually kind of helped the Buckeyes land Jackson, because Jackson had already established some rapport with Locklyn prior to him coming to Ohio State. It was a guy that obviously Oregon was looking at already. And so he just kind of brought that with him. And so we get an answer to that question almost immediately. And Nick and I talked back when the Locklyn hire was made, just about him having to prove that to us. And it's not so much I don't think Carlos Locklyn's laying up at night wondering if he has to prove to Ohio State fans the type of recruiter he is, the type of coach he is, all these different things. His reputation precedes him. He's a very good running back coach. There's a reason Ohio State wanted him. He's going to bring a lot to the table. I think we recognize that. But seeing it in action, seeing the transition and making sure there's not this drop-off and bringing in your own sort of staple recruiting class says a lot. And that's kind of that prove it feeling for us as fans, us who cover the team, talk about the team, to kind of be sold on, okay, yeah, this is going to work. This was a good hire. Ohio State's going to be straight at that position. There's not going to be a drop-off. And as we know, Ohio State's always been known for having strong running backs, whether it's Maurice Clarett, whether it's Ezekiel Elliott, whether it's Archie Griffith, any of them. And so Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, who are there right now, to be able to have that be part of their identity, I think is something that really does resonate with the fan base and something that people want to see. And it's always been something that they pride themselves on. I also think it's important in the conversation of trying to beat Michigan, because how did Michigan run their way to the national championship last year? It was with a strong run game. It was being physical up front. And so to get running backs in here who can impact that in a positive way under Locklyn's tutelage, I think is also very important in terms of establishing like, hey, we're not just this finesse team, which I think is it's the crisis, it's the label that Ryan Day is trying to shake at this point, that he's not just this finesse coach who can only beat you one way. He can change it up and have this powerful running game, and he can out physical you, which again is the bread and butter of the national championship team last year for Michigan that they rode all the way to a title. So for him to kind of do that, I think it's important to get good running backs in your recruiting classes, bring them in here, develop them, and Bo Jackson represents that. But yeah, from the standpoint of Locklyn, this is a big move because I don't know that calming the waters isn't the right thing to say. That's what I want to say, but that's not the right thing to say because I don't know that people were panicking about losing Alford. I think more so people were, maybe they were panicking in that they were worried about Alford leaving and taking trade secrets with him and now being on arrival. And if you lose, it's just another thing that you can use against Ryan Day. And, oh, well, here you go. Tony Alford being the traitor that he is, sold the store to Michigan. So I understand where that is maybe something people were worried about, but I don't think people were worried about Locklyn specifically. But to see in action his recruiting plan sort of coming to fruition, and for him to land a prospect like Bo Jackson and sort of immediately here answer those questions and give us a sneak peek to like, okay, all right, this is still something that Ohio State's going to thrive at. It's still something that they're going to do well, and Locklyn's going to be at the forefront of that. It makes you feel good. It's a good thing to see. I think it's an important thing to see. And now it's just about making sure you keep that commitment, you get him in here, and you can obviously bring him to Ohio State officially when he signs on the dotted line next it's signing day next December to start developing him into hopefully what it will be the next great Ohio State running back after Travion Henderson, after Quinshon Judkins leaves, and in the shadow or the sort of following suit with some of these other greats that have obviously come before. So very exciting move for the Buckeyes this week. What did you think of the commitment from Bo Jackson, Cleveland guy, Cleveland native, close to home here in Northeast Ohio, and a guy that obviously is going to come in with some pretty high expectations on top of the fact that he's going to fit right into a class of or a depth chart of running backs next year that hasn't proven a lot just yet on the field, and so he might have a chance to compete. Let me know your thoughts at Spencito_ on X. You can also comment in the 92.3 The Fan YouTube channel and let us know what you thought about the Bo Jackson the Bo Jackson commitment. Signing will come hopefully next year or later this year, but not signed yet. I'm curious what you guys have to say about it, what you feel about it, and if you agree with me, it's a good thing to see from Locklyn, who just got here and is kind of trying to establish himself with the program and let Ohio State fans know what he's all about. We got that with this, I think this week. When we get back, guys, let's take a break. I do want to get into, there was, according to, or ESPN put out through their FPI, their Football Power Index, which teams have the best chance to be undefeated this upcoming season. First of all, where did Ohio State fall on the list? And is going undefeated as important to Ohio State fans as it used to be? We'll talk about that when we get back. But first, here is a quick word from our sponsors.